Alright, hello, welcome back everybody. PayPal and Patreon are down below along with the YouTube super support buttons or whatever. If you want to support me, that is, only do so if you actually can. And enormous gratitude to anyone who does at the moment, since my dad has not gotten paid for over a month now because the government is shut down at the moment. Anyways, this is a quick update on oil and gas news in Somalia. You may remember a while ago, over a year ago, I made a video about how oil and gas exploration was finally starting offshore of Somalia. Well, the initial exploration was completed earlier this year in the blocks that were auctioned off that were able to be explored, that is, and a number of potential assets were found. And the primarily Turkish company behind everything is going to begin test drilling next year, most likely in the early part of the year. Hopefully, we'll see, which is the next stage in the oil and gas development process after exploration. As first, you do the exploration, whether onshore or offshore, where you send sonic signals down into the rock and they bounce back a certain way if they detect what might be oil and gas deposits. Then, after you identify those, you have to do test drilling, which is where you drill a few sample wells into each deposit to first find out if it is, in fact, oil. And then, secondly, find out what kind of oil it is. Is it light oil, regular crude, heavy oil? As the different kinds of oil require different types of strategies and infrastructure to actually pump out, and then determine also what's the pressure in the system, what's the porosity in the rock, or what's the flow rate of the oil, thus determining how much you'll actually be able to get out of the wells once you drill and establish them later. So those tests are going to begin next year on the different potential deposits that have been identified. And after that comes the process, if a decision is made to develop those deposits, to then begin laying the undersea pipeline infrastructure and drilling the actual production wells and setting up the oil export terminal that will need to be set up either just offshore or somewhere on the coast. Basically, going through the same process that Guyana went through and that Namibia is going through at the moment. And if everything goes as quickly as possible on the fastest possible track, if it's speed run, so to speak, like it was in Guyana, then the exploration in Guyana that found the first field was done in 2014. The test drilling and then decision after finding the results to develop that first field was done in 2015, and the field was fully developed and began pumping oil in 2019. So the fastest process in a totally new, undeveloped area or system like offshore of Guyana or now offshore of Somalia and Namibia is usually 3 to 4 years at the fastest from the decision to commit, which would be theoretically made next year following the results of the test drilling. Then the likely earliest actual first production would come around 2029 or 2030, basically around or about a year after Namibia is expected to start up. So Namibia and Somalia will be starting up around the same time. Now, higher than realistic numbers have been floated around, most likely coming from the oil and gas company that's developing the reserves themselves. But even though the amount of oil in the deposits found is likely a decent bit less than the company is claiming, it is still probably going to end up being in the range of these few fields together being able to give an initial jump start of a few 100,000 barrels per day. Again, similar to what occurred offshore of Guyana, although the revenue sharing deal that was agreed to by the Somali government with the Turkish company is not the best, in that the Turkish company gets 90% of the revenue and Somalia only gets 10, even though the oil companies usually do get a larger share of the revenue than whatever particular country's government does. It's not usually so small as to be only 10%. But that's an issue for the Somali government to deal with and explain to its citizens. Anyways, that's it for this one. So thank you everybody for sticking around and listening. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't already. PayPal, Patreon, all the super YouTube, whatever buttons are down there if you want to support me. Only do so if you actually can. There's a link in the description to a drive folder with all kinds of different oil and gas, energy, electricity, mining, minerals, economic, everything graphs that are all free to access and use if you want to. There's a link in the top pinned comment to my cat's YouTube channel. May God bless and protect all of you, and I will see you all around next time.